The sun was just starting to peek over the horizon, casting gentle shades of pink and orange across the sky. The crisp morning air was laced with the scent of dew-covered grass as I loaded the last cooler into the trunk. Today was the day I'd been eagerly awaiting for weeks, a picnic with our closest friends. My wife was already in a great mood. She'd spent the previous evening carefully preparing her famous pasta salad and packing an assortment of snacks. "It's going to be perfect," she said, her brown eyes sparkling with excitement. I couldn't help but smile at her optimism, feeling grateful for this rare chance to relax with people we truly cared about. Our group was made up of friends I'd known since college. There was Adam, a goofy but reliable guy who loved fishing, and Luke, the life of the party, always ready with a joke and his unmistakable booming laugh. Their partners were joining us too, making it a group of 8. We got to the park before anyone else, and snagged the best spot under a cluster of oak trees that offered just the right amount of shade. Nearby, the lake shimmered under the morning sun, promising a day full of relaxation and great conversation. By mid-morning, everyone had arrived, and laughter filled the air as we spread out blankets and set up chairs. Luke made his signature grand entrance, his Bluetooth speaker blasting an upbeat playlist that had everyone unconsciously tapping their feet. Sophia moved effortlessly among our friends, her charm and warmth drawing people in like a magnet. I watched her from a distance, my heart swelling with pride. She always seemed to be the center of attention, but never in an overbearing way. At that moment, everything felt perfect, the kind of memory I'd hold on to when life got overwhelming. But beneath all the laughter and lightheartedness, secrets were beginning to surface, even though I couldn't see it yet. As the sun climbed higher, the picnic was in full swing. Conversations flowed easily, punctuated by the clinking of glasses and the crunch of chips. I found myself chatting with Adam and Luke about a recent football game while Sophia kept everyone entertained with her funny stories. At one point, Sophia mentioned needing something from the car. Adam quickly offered to help, and the two of them walked off toward the parking lot. It seemed a bit unusual. Sophia was pretty independent and didn't typically need help with small errands. But I shrugged it off, figuring Adam was just being his usual helpful self. Minutes ticked by, stretching longer than expected, but eventually, they came back, laughing about something I couldn't quite hear. When I asked what was so funny, Sophia waved her hand casually. "Oh, nothing. Adam just got mixed up about which car was ours." Luke immediately jumped in, nudging Adam with a playful grin. "Careful, man. You might end up driving home with the wrong wife." Everyone burst into laughter, but I caught a quick flicker in Sophia's eyes. Was that guilt? I shook off the thought, telling myself I was overthinking it. The day continued smoothly. We played frisbee, took turns paddling on the lake, and ate way more than we should have. For the moment, everything seemed perfectly normal. But looking back, that was the first crack in the facade. Luke wandered over to where Sophia was sitting by the picnic blanket, helping her rearrange some drinks in the cooler. Their conversation seemed lighthearted, filled with smiles and casual laughter, but a nagging feeling of unease started to settle in my chest as I watched them from a distance. Later on, while I was chatting with another friend, I noticed Sophia exchanging glances with Adam and Luke. They were quick, fleeting looks, easy to overlook if I hadn't been paying close attention. A chill ran down my spine despite the warmth of the afternoon. Were these just harmless interactions among old friends, or was there something unspoken passing between them? By now, the sun was at its highest point, bathing the park in a golden glow. The earlier buzz of activity had faded into a lazy afternoon lull, with everyone lounging in the shade. I leaned back in my chair, sipping a cold drink, while Sophia sat cross-legged on the blanket a few feet away, chatting animatedly with Luke. Her laughter echoed through the air, as infectious as always, but this time, it felt different, almost forced. I watched as Luke casually reached over to brush something off her shoulder. It was pelucably just a leaf, but his hand seemed to linger a moment longer than necessary. Before I could fully process it, Adam's voice cut through the moment. "Hey man," he called to Luke. "You gonna grab another beer or what?" Luke laughed and stood up, mumbling something about needing to cool off. As he walked away, I noticed Sophia's eyes follow him for just a second before she turned back to the group. Adam sauntered over and plopped down in the chair next to me. "Perfect day for this, huh?" he said, taking a long sip of his drink. "Yeah," I replied, my voice distant as my eyes drifted back to Sophia, now scrolling through her phone. Adam tilted his head, studying me. "You good?" he asked. I hesitated for a moment before forcing a smile. "Yeah, just tired, I guess." Adam nodded, clearly buying my excuse. "Same here. Crazy week. This is exactly what we all needed." I wanted to agree with him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. As the afternoon dragged on, I couldn't help but notice the subtle exchanges, the glances, the smiles, the casual touches, between Sophia and either Adam or Luke. None of it was overtly inappropriate, but it was just enough to plant a seed of doubt. I tried to push the thoughts away, reminding myself that these were my closest friends. Sophia loved me, there was no way she'd cross a line. Would she? By now, the sun was sinking lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the park. Someone suggested taking a short hike up to a nearby lookout point, and everyone jumped at the idea. It sounded like a great way to wrap up the day, but as we all started packing up, I couldn't help but feel that the day's events had left a lingering shadow of their own. I tossed a few water bottles into my backpack while Sophia tied her shoes nearby, chatting easily with Adam. Luke was off to the side, helping someone gather their stuff. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a brief moment, a quick, knowing smile exchanged between Sophia and Luke. I brushed it off, but a faint unease lingered. As we started down the trail, Sophia naturally fell in step with Adam, while I ended up near the front with Luke. The rhythmic crunch of gravel underfoot and the occasional call of a bird filled the air. It was a beautiful day, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling sitting heavy in my chest. "Everything good?" Luke asked, glancing over at me. "Yeah, why?" I replied, maybe a little too quickly. He raised an eyebrow, a playful smirk on his face. "You're just quieter than usual." "Not like you." I forced a smile. "Just soaking in the peace and quiet, I guess." Behind us, Sophia's laughter rang out as she leaned in close to Adam, whispering something that made him chuckle. I looked back just in time to catch the way she lightly touched his arm. I tried to ignore the tightness in my chest. Luke's voice pulled me back. "Sophia's in her element today, huh? She's got everybody wrapped around her finger." I let out an uneasy chuckle. "Yeah, that's just how she is." We eventually reached the lookout point, where a breathtaking view of the lake and surrounding hills spread out before us. Everyone gathered around, snapping pictures and admiring the scene. Sophia stood beside me, her arm brushing against mine as she took in the view, her face lit up with wonder. In that moment, I felt foolish for letting my imagination run wild. This was my wife, the woman I loved, standing right here next to me. But on the hike back, I noticed another lingering look between her and Luke. It was quick, just a second too long, but it was there. The uneasy feeling came rushing back, heavier this time, like a weight pressing on my chest. The walk back to our picnic spot seemed to stretch on forever. The air between Sophia and me felt charged with something unspoken, a tension I couldn't quite name. She was her usual bubbly self, joking with the group and keeping the conversation lively, but I noticed her laughter didn't quite reach her eyes. Once we got back, someone suggested playing charades. Normally, it was the kind of fun, light-hearted activity that brought us all together, but I struggled to stay present. Sophia volunteered to go first, throwing herself into her role with her usual enthusiasm, acting out a scene that had everyone shouting out guesses and laughing. As the game went on, I couldn't help but notice how attentive Adam and Luke were to her. It wasn't anything obvious, just the way their eyes stayed on her a little too long, or how eagerly they jumped to respond to her gestures. When it was Adam's turn, he made a big show of roping Sophia into helping him act out his clue. They stumbled through the performance, laughing and bumping into each other, which earned them cheers and playful jeers from the group. "Great teamwork!" someone shouted, and Sophia flashed Adam a smile that lingered just a second longer than necessary. I forced myself to laugh along with everyone else, even as my stomach twisted. I wanted to believe it was all innocent, just friends having fun, but doubt was slowly seeping in. All right, who's up next? Someone called, and the game continued, laughter echoing around us. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that something wasn't right. But my mind was miles away. I wasn't really there anymore. My thoughts spun in circles, piecing together every strange interaction, every quick glance I'd noticed throughout the day. Was I just being paranoid? Was it all harmless fun, and I was reading too much into it? I must have looked pretty out of it because Luke wandered over and gave me a playful clap on the shoulder. You good, man? You look like you've seen a ghost. I forced a smile. I'm fine. Luke grinned. Better not let Sophia catch you zoning out. She'll think you're bored of her charade skills. I let out a half-hearted chuckle, but his words hit a nerve. Was I just imagining things, or was something happening right under my nose? The sun was starting to sink, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson. People were slowly packing up, but the mood stayed light, with laughter and jokes flying around. I kept myself busy, shoving leftover food into coolers, my head down and my thoughts tangled. Across the clearing, Sophia stood with Luke and Adam, her laughter ringing out as she playfully swatted Luke's arm. Adam stood just a little too close, his hand briefly brushing against her lower back. My stomach twisted, a sharp pain hitting me square in the gut, even though I couldn't fully explain why. Need a hand with that? One of the other friends asked, snapping me out of my daze. Yeah, thanks, I mumbled, handing over a half-empty Tupperware. I loaded the last cooler into the car, closing the trunk just as Sophia walked over, her cheeks pink and her smile bright. You okay? You've been quiet today. I hesitated, searching her face for some kind of sign, an answer to all the questions swirling in my head. Yeah, just a lot on my mind. She tilted her head, her expression softening. You sure? You've been in your own world all day. I forced another smile. I'm fine. Just tired, I guess. She looked at me for another moment, then nodded, not pushing any further before turning back to rejoin the others. I watched her walk away, the knot of doubt in my chest tightening into something darker, something I wasn't ready to name. As we all started getting ready to leave, Luke called out, Hey Sophia, mind giving me a hand with something? She glanced back at me, just for a split second, then smiled. Sure, what do you need? I waited, expecting her to check if I needed help or at least say she'd be right back. But she didn't. She just followed Luke towards the cars, leaving me standing there with a heavy feeling I couldn't shake. Around me, the others were saying their goodbyes, laughter and casual chatter lingering in the cooling evening air. I stood by the car, fiddling with the strap of the picnic bag, my eyes scanning the park. Adam was still there by the blanket, folding it up with exaggerated slowness, like he was deliberately delaying his exit. I watched him out of the corner of my eye, the uneasy feeling in my chest growing heavier by the second. Luke and Sophia were still standing by his car, their heads bent close as they spoke in low voices. I watched them, a storm of questions swirling in my mind. What on earth could they be discussing that required so much privacy? Before I could linger on it too long, Adam's voice snapped me back to the present. Need a hand with that? He asked, nodding toward the bag in my grip. I shook my head and forced a tight smile. I've got it. Adam hesitated, then leaned casually against the car beside me. Great day, huh? Yeah, I replied, trying to keep my voice even. His eyes flicked toward Luke and Sophia, then back to me. You good, man? You've seemed a little off today. I let out a forced chuckle. Guess I'm just not as good at relaxing as I thought. Adam laughed, giving my shoulder a friendly slap. Well, you'll have plenty of time to unwind later. Don't let us stress you out too much. Something about the way he said it was just a little too casual, too smooth. It set my nerves on edge. But before I could respond, Sophia walked over, her cheeks flushed and her smile bright. All set, she said, her voice cheerful. Luke trailed behind her, giving me a casual nod before heading off to his own car. I watched him go, a heavy knot forming in my chest as we climbed into ours. My mind was racing, questions tumbling over each other. Sophia hummed softly to herself, her fingers tapping lightly against her leg as if everything was perfectly normal. I couldn't help myself. Everything okay with Luke? I tried to sound casual, like it was just a passing question. She glanced at me, her face unreadable. Oh, yeah? He just needed help finding something in the trunk. I nodded, not pushing it any further, but that small seed of doubt was growing, taking root somewhere deep inside. The drive home was strangely quiet. Normally, Sophia and I would chat about the day, laughing about jokes we'd heard or sharing little moments that stood out. But now, it felt like an invisible wall stood between us. She kept her gaze on the window, her fingers tapping rhythmically on her thigh as the last streaks of sunlight faded behind the horizon. I glanced at her, searching for any clue, anything to either confirm or ease my suspicions. She seemed perfectly calm, but there was something about her silence that felt calculated, like she was keeping herself in check. I cleared my throat, breaking the tense silence. Did you have fun today? She turned to me, her face softened by the warm glow of the dashboard lights. Of course. It was such a perfect day, wasn't it? I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. Yeah, it was nice. She laughed, nudging my arm playfully. Nice? You're underselling it. We don't get to spend time with everyone like that very often. We should do it more. Her words were light and genuine, her tone full of enthusiasm, but they only made the knot in my stomach tighten. I forced a smile, nodding along, but inside, the doubt was growing, spreading like a shadow I couldn't escape. I hesitated, then finally asked, "What were you and Luke talking about back there?" She paused, her smile faltering for just a split second, a moment so brief I almost doubted I'd seen it. "Oh, nothing important," she said, her voice light. "He just needed help organizing something for next weekend." "Next weekend?" I pressed, trying to keep my tone casual. She waved a hand dismissively. "Yeah, something about a barbecue he's planning. He wants me to bring that pasta salad everyone loves." Her explanation was so smooth, so perfectly reasonable, that I almost felt guilty for asking. But a quiet voice inside me wouldn't let it go. We pulled into the driveway, and Sophia hopped out quickly, gathering her things and heading toward the house. I stayed behind, sitting in the car for a moment, staring after her. The doubt wasn't just a nagging feeling anymore, it was a full-blown storm raging in my mind. That night, the house was unusually quiet. Sophia showered and went to bed early, her laughter from the day replaced by a serene calm that somehow felt off. I stayed downstairs, nursing a beer as the TV flickered in front of me. I wasn't watching it, though. My mind kept replaying every moment from the picnic, every glance, every touch, every seemingly innocent exchange between Sophia and Adam or Luke. I turned each one over in my mind, searching for something I could cling to, proof that I was just being paranoid. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. When I finally went upstairs, Sophia was already asleep. Her chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm, her face relaxed and peaceful. She looked angelic, utterly content, and for a second, I felt like the worst person in the world for doubting her. But I couldn't bring myself to lie down beside her. Instead, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor, my mind spinning with questions I couldn't answer. If there was something going on, I needed to know. I couldn't live with this doubt eating away at me. The next morning, Sophia was her usual self, bustling around the kitchen, humming to herself as she made coffee. I sat at the table, nursing my own mug, watching her closely. Every movement, every expression, analyzing it all for some hidden meaning. "You're awfully chipper this morning," I said, trying to sound casual. She turned to me, her eyes bright. "Why wouldn't I be? Yesterday was great, and I feel so refreshed." I nodded slowly, swirling my coffee. "Did you think Luke and Adam seemed different yesterday?" She froze, just for a half-second, her back to me as she poured her coffee. "Different? How do you mean?" I shrugged, trying to sound nonchalant. "I don't know, maybe I'm imagining it." She turned, her smile still in place, but her eyes looked guarded. "You're overthinking things, honey. It was just a fun day with friends." Her reassurance should have eased my worries, but instead, it made my chest tighten. There was something in her tone, a little too dismissive, too quick to brush it off. I knew right then that I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I needed answers, no matter how much it hurt. I needed clarity, no matter how much it hurt. The next few days passed in a haze of doubt and unease. Sophia went about her routines as if nothing had changed, laughing, chatting, and moving through life with the same easy grace I'd always admired. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something dark was lurking just beneath the surface. One evening, while she was out at her yoga class, I found myself pacing the living room, the weight of my suspicions pressing down on me like a stone. My mind raced, replaying every glance, every laugh, every lingering touch I'd seen that day at the picnic. I needed answers. I needed the truth, even if it shattered me. I stood in front of her desk, my heart pounding. I hesitated, staring at her laptop, knowing that once I crossed this line, there would be no going back. But I was desperate. I couldn't live with this gnawing doubt anymore. I opened the laptop, feeling a sick knot in my stomach as I navigated to her messages. Her email inbox was perfectly ordinary: bills, work updates, and the usual flood of promotional junk. But when I opened her messaging app, my heart sank. There it was, a thread with Adam, buried beneath other conversations. I clicked on it, my hands trembling as I scrolled through the messages. At first, it seemed innocent enough: jokes, light banter, nothing out of the ordinary. But as I kept scrolling, the tone shifted. Adam, yesterday was incredible. Can't wait for next time. Sophia, we have to be more careful. I think he's starting to notice something. Adam, don't worry. I've got it under control. I felt the blood drain from my face. My heart pounded in my chest as I read and reread the words, each line cutting deeper than the last. I kept scrolling, the messages painting a picture I didn't want to see: hidden meetings, stolen moments, a web of lies stretching back for weeks, maybe months. And then I saw another name. Luke. My stomach dropped as I clicked on his thread. Luke, you're amazing. Can't stop thinking about our time together. Sophia, me too, but we have to keep it quiet. He can never find out. My world shattered. It wasn't just Adam. It was both of them. Two of my closest friends, two people I trusted, had betrayed me. And Sophia, she was at the center of it all. I sat there, staring at the screen as my hands shook. My mind was racing, my heart aching, my entire world crumbling around me. I felt sick, dizzy, like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Downstairs, the door opened, and Sophia's cheerful voice echoed through the house. I'm back! I snapped the laptop shut, my heart hammering as I stood up, trying to steady myself. I wasn't ready to confront her. Not yet. I needed time to process what I'd seen, to figure out what to do next. But one thing was certain: there was no going back from this. The next day, the weight of my discovery hung heavy in the air. I moved through the motions of the day on autopilot, my mind replaying those messages over and over. Sophia was her usual self, vibrant and full of life, chatting about errands and asking if I had any plans for the evening. I gave half-hearted responses, fighting to keep my voice steady while anger and heartbreak churned inside me. By evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. Sophia, I said, my voice cold and flat as she set the table for dinner. We need to talk. She paused, a plate still in her hand. Her eyes flicked to my face, a hint of worry crossing her expression. Sure, what's on your mind? I gestured to the chair across from me. Sit down. She hesitated, then set the plate down and took the seat opposite me. For a long moment, I just looked at her, the woman I'd loved, the woman I thought I knew better than anyone else. My heart twisted painfully as I remembered all the laughter, the shared dreams, the promises we'd made to each other. I took a deep breath, my fists clenched under the table. How long has it been going on? Her face went pale, her eyes widening. WH. What are you talking about? I reached out to Luke's girlfriend, meeting her at a quiet spot by the park. She looked so happy to see me, her eyes lighting up as she waved. The sight twisted the knife in my chest even deeper, knowing I was about to shatter her world. I didn't dance around the truth. I laid it all out plainly, showing her the messages, letting her see every damning word for herself. Her face went pale, then red with anger, tears brimming in her eyes as she whispered, "I trusted him. I trusted them both." I wanted to comfort her, to apologize for being the bearer of this pain, but nothing felt right. She stood abruptly, wiping her eyes before walking away without another word. I watched her go, feeling the weight of this tangled web of betrayal pressing down on me. By the time I got back home, the house was eerily quiet. Sophia was sitting at the kitchen table, her face pale and drawn, eyes swollen from crying. She looked up as I walked in, hope flickering in her gaze. Did you tell them?" I didn't answer. Instead, I set my keys down, leaning against the counter as I looked at her. "How long?" She flinched as if I'd slapped her. I don't know. A few months, maybe longer. It wasn't supposed to be like this." I laughed, the sound cold and bitter. "It wasn't supposed to be like this? You lied to me, to everyone. You made me feel crazy, questioning everything, and for what? A few stolen moments?" Tears streamed down her face as she buried her head in her hands. "I never meant to hurt you. I never meant for any of this to happen. I was stupid and selfish, and I don't have any excuses." I looked at her, really looked at her, trying to reconcile this broken woman with the person I thought I knew. But all I saw was shattered pieces that didn't fit together anymore. "You didn't just hurt me. You destroyed everything. Us, our life, my friendships, all of it, gone because you were bored or wanted excitement or… I don't even know. And the worst part? You didn't just betray me once. You did it twice. With two of the people I trusted most." She sobbed, shoulders shaking, but I felt nothing, just a hollow ache where my heart used to be. "I need you to leave," I said finally, my voice flat. "Pack a bag and go stay somewhere else. I can't look at you right now." She looked up, eyes wide and pleading. "Please don't do this. Let's talk. We can fix this." "There's nothing to fix," I cut in, my tone cold and final. "You made your choices. Now you have to live with them. And so do I." She stood slowly, moving like she was in a daze, and walked upstairs. I heard her packing, the quiet thud of drawers opening and closing, the soft rustle of clothes. When she finally came back down, her face was hollow, defeated. She hesitated at the door, her eyes searching mine for any sign of forgiveness, any trace of hope. But I had none left to give. She left without another word, the door clicking shut behind her. The house felt impossibly silent, the echoes of her presence lingering in every corner. I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands, feeling the weight of everything crashing down around me. The life I thought I had, the love I thought was real, it was all gone, crumbled to dust by her choices and their betrayals. I had confronted the truth, faced the deception head-on. But now came the hardest part, figuring out how to rebuild from the ashes. I reached out to Luke's girlfriend. We didn't know each other well, we'd met a few times at group gatherings, but she deserved to know the truth. I told her everything, showing her the messages without holding back. Her reaction wasn't emotional, it was pure, unfiltered rage. "That bastard," she spat, her eyes flashing with fury. "He's going to regret this." I watched her storm off, feeling a strange sense of relief. It didn't fix anything, but at least the truth was out there. And I wasn't the only one hurting anymore. By the time I got home, the weight on my chest felt a little lighter, but I knew I wasn't done. That evening, I faced Sophia, my voice cold and steady. "You need to leave the house." Her eyes went wide, panic flickering across her face. "But this is my home too. You gave that up when you betrayed me." I cut in, my tone sharp and unyielding. "You have 1 week. I want you out." Her face crumpled as the reality of my words hit her. "Please, can't we talk about this?" I shook my head, my resolve firm. "There's nothing to talk about. I've already started the divorce process. You can work out the details with my lawyer." Tears filled her eyes, her shoulders sagging as she realized I was serious. But I felt no sympathy. No guilt. Just a cold, hollow resolve. This was my life, and I was taking it back. The next few days were a painful blur. Sophia swung between sorrow and desperation, trying to talk to me, pleading for forgiveness. But I refused to engage. Every time she tried to explain herself, I walked away. There was no excuse she could give that would make this right. There was no path forward for us. Meanwhile, the fallout from my revelations rippled through our social circle like an earthquake. Adam's wife confronted him in a confrontation so loud that neighbors heard. It ended with her packing up the kids and leaving to stay with her parents. Luke didn't fare any better. His girlfriend dumped him over a scathing text message that left no room for doubt. I hadn't planned on the domino effect, but watching their lives crumble gave me a grim sense of satisfaction. They planted the seeds of this disaster with their lies and betrayals. Now, they were reaping the harvest. A few days later, there was a knock at my door. I opened it just enough to see Adam standing there, looking like he hadn't slept in days. His shoulders were slumped, his face drawn with guilt and desperation. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice cold and flat. He held up his hands, trying to look remorseful. "Look, man. I know I screwed up. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but can we at least talk? Please?" I stared at him, feeling nothing but contempt. "There's nothing to talk about, Adam. You betrayed me. You're not my friend anymore." His face twisted in pain, his shoulders slumping even more. "I get that. I do. But I can't lose everything. Can't we figure something out?" I narrowed my eyes, my voice like ice. "You lost everything because of your choices. I didn't force you to do anything. Now get off my porch before I call the cops." His face fell, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered the lies, the betrayal, and the hurt he caused. Without another word, I shut the door in his face, leaning against it as anger and bitterness surged through me. That night, Sophia came to me with a new plea. Her face was pale, her eyes swollen from crying. "Please," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We can go to counseling, rebuild what we've lost. I'll do anything to make this right." I looked at her, my heart cold and unyielding. "You can't rebuild trust once it's shattered," I said, my tone detached and final. "What you did, it can't be undone. You made your choice, Sophia. Now you have to live with it." Her shoulders sagged, her face crumpling as she realized I wasn't going to change my mind. She broke down, sobbing quietly, but I felt nothing. Just a hollow satisfaction that this chapter of my life was finally coming to an end. With each passing day, I felt the pieces of my shattered world slowly starting to realign. It would be a long road, but at least now, I could finally begin to rebuild. Moment felt like the calm before a storm. The weight of everything I had been holding back, all the betrayal, the lies, and the hurt, was about to come crashing down. I let the silence stretch, savoring the tension in the room. "Do you see this?" I continued, my voice unwavering, though my insides were a mixture of anger and satisfaction. "This is what happens when trust is destroyed. These are the consequences of your actions." Adam and Luke, both visibly shaken, exchanged frantic glances, but neither said a word. Sophia's face was pale, the color draining from her cheeks as she stared at the printed messages in disbelief. She looked up at me, her eyes wide, her lips trembling as though she was trying to find the words to explain herself, but I wasn't giving her the chance. "Do you really think this can be swept under the rug?" I asked, addressing them all but focusing on her. "This isn't something you can fix with a few tears and empty promises. You've all crossed a line, and now, it's time to face the truth." The group was still silent, some faces turned away, others glued to the table, avoiding the eye contact that would force them to acknowledge what had happened. I could see some of our friends glancing at Sophia, their expressions mixed with pity and disbelief. It wasn't just her betrayal, it was the realization that they had all been living in the same circle, watching the lies unfold, but never seeing it for what it was until now. "I want everyone here to understand that I've already made my decision," I continued, letting the room feel the finality of my words. This is over. There's no coming back from this. Sophia's face contorted, and her hands dropped from her mouth as she leaned forward, her voice barely a whisper. Please don't do this. You don't have to make this public. We can fix this. But it was too late. I had no more words for her. Adam cleared his throat, his voice strained, as he tried to salvage something from the wreckage. I never meant for things to go this far. We were just... I don't know what I was thinking. But please don't do this in front of everyone. It's humiliating. Good, I said, my voice cold as ice. Maybe now you'll understand how it feels to be humiliated. To have the truth laid bare for all to see. You don't get to decide when or where you face the consequences of your actions. This is your reckoning. Luke, standing next to Adam, shifted uncomfortably, his hands in his pockets as he avoided looking at anyone. I fucked up. He muttered, barely audible, but it didn't matter. His apology meant nothing now. The rest of the evening passed in strained silence. I could see the cracks spreading further, and even though they tried to salvage whatever dignity they had left, it was clear that the bonds we had shared were shattered beyond repair. There would be no fixing this. As the last guests filtered out, I remained standing in the middle of the room, surveying the wreckage. Sophia's attempts to engage with me were met with silence. She knew she'd lost me. Adam and Luke avoided my gaze, the shame weighing heavily on them. It wasn't the closure I had imagined, but it was the final act I needed. No more secrets. No more pretending. It was over, and I had taken back control of my life. I looked down at the table, my hands trembling slightly as I recalled the storm of emotions that had ripped through the room that night. The truth had been laid bare, and there was no going back. The chaos, the shouting, the accusations, it had all been a culmination of years of lies and betrayal, and I had been the one to pull the trigger. But as the dust settled, the aftermath felt different. It wasn't the bitter satisfaction I'd expected. It was something else, something I couldn't fully put into words. Watching Sophia leave, watching Adam and Luke fall apart in real time, it all hit harder than I anticipated. I had won, but the cost was immeasurable. Days later, when Sophia was gone for good, I stood in the empty house, the silence of it all swallowing me whole. Her absence left a hole, but it wasn't the kind I thought it would be. It wasn't the emptiness of longing or regret, it was the absence of something toxic, something that needed to go. The aftermath spread quickly. Adam's wife moved away, taking the kids and leaving him to rot in the wreckage of his own making. Luke, once the center of every gathering, now had nowhere to turn. The people he'd once called friends had all turned their backs on him, leaving him to lick his wounds in isolation. And me? I started again. It wasn't easy. The house I'd sold, the life I'd rebuilt, it wasn't quick, and it wasn't pretty. Therapy helped more than I expected, and slowly, I began to find myself again. The work I threw myself into wasn't just a distraction, it was my healing. Every day, I felt the cracks mend, the wounds close, a little more. But the scars would remain. They always would. Months later, at that cafe, something shifted in me. It was a small, almost imperceptible shift, but it was enough. The woman's smile, her laugh, so genuine, so real, reminded me of what I'd been missing. And I realized, I wasn't broken anymore. I was healing. I left that cafe that night with the beginnings of something new, a feeling I hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope. The past, with all its pain and betrayal, would never leave me. But it no longer had the power to control me. The future, once a thing to dread, now seemed like something to embrace. And as I looked out over the city, the horizon seemed a little brighter than it ever had before.